This is being recorded on the 27th of January, 2015 at the Florence-Lauderdale Public Library in Florence, Alabama. And the conversation here this morning is with Ansley Quiros and myself, Tom Osborne, and our guest this morning is Robert M. Hill, Jr., Bob Hill, a man I'll tell you a little bit about, and then we'll hear from him. Bob Hill got his undergraduate degree from the University of Alabama in geology. He received his law degree from the University of Alabama Law School in 1959. And after he graduated from law school, he served as a judicial law clerk to Justice John Goodwin of the Supreme Court of Alabama, and then he was appointed to the office of Assistant Attorney General by Attorney General McDonnell Gallion. He served 3 four-year terms in the Alabama House of Representatives, where he was a member of the Legislative Council and the State Building Commission, and he served as floor leader for Governor Albert Brewer. He was the chief sponsor of the Constitutional Judicial Article of 1973, which was the most important change in the Alabama Constitution of 1901, reforming and modernizing the judicial system of the state. He served as a former municipal court judge, as president of the Alabama Municipal Judges Association. He has taught business law and criminal justice as an adjunct at the University of North Alabama. I will refrain from reading the long list of his honors and other civic accomplishments, except to mention that in 2012 he was chosen as Shoals Citizen of the Year. Thank you for coming and talking with us today in this conversation about the 60s in the Shoals. And I know that you brought some things that you want to read to us, but can we begin with a little general background about your family growing up? And
yes, let me do this. One very important recognition that's on that list was that I received the Outstanding Legislative Award from Tri-County Division of the NAACP. I'm very proud of that award. I'm going to talk about both my father, Judge Robert M. Hill, who was circuit judge for 34 years, and then about my service in the Alabama House of Representatives. And this really spans a period of civil rights during the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think I can describe my father best by reading the obituary that I did for him when he passed away in 1984. More than 30 years of what many of his friends and associates called an era that can never be repeated ended Friday, January 6, 1989, when retired Lauderdale County Circuit Judge Robert McClellan Hill, 84, died. He began his legal career in Florence in 1929 when he was judge of the Law and Equity Court. This was prior to his appointment to the State Pardon and Parole Board, which was a new creation by the legislature that reformed the criminal justice system in Alabama, including the inauguration of adult probation. He served 2.5 years in the Army in the Allied military government in Italy during World War II and was awarded the Bronze Star for outstanding military service. In 1982, the University of Alabama Press published his military memoirs under the title In the Wake of War, a copy of which is here in the Florence-Lauderdale Public Library. Judge Hill was elected circuit judge in 1946 at a time when the judicial circuit consisted of Lauderdale, Colbert, and Franklin counties. During his career as circuit judge, he served on the National Advisory Council of Judges as an elected member of the American Academy of Judicial Education. He became semi-retired in January 1977, but continued his service to the judicial system by assignment of cases and writing opinion for the Court of Criminal Appeals. He served as president of the Alabama Association of Circuit Judges and is awarded the Certificate of Distinguished Public Service by the University of Alabama School of Law. He was a faithful member of the First Methodist Church, singing in the choir and serving on the Board of Stewards. Judge Hill exemplified the attributes of a judge: to hear courteously, to consider soberly, and to answer wisely, and to decide impartially. His life leaves a rich heritage and legacy for the legal profession.
I remember him well, and I remember him very much as you described him, although we did not arrive here until 1978 when he was already retired or semi-retired. He's a very distinguished man.
Well, after Dad came back from the Second World War, at the end of the war in 1945, there was a vacancy for a judgeship, which, as I've read from his obituary, consisted of Lauderdale, Colbert, and Franklin counties. And after he won the election and was started his service as circuit judge, the black community soon realized that he was a friend and supporter of their causes. He often attended black churches, usually with his wife Rachel, my mother. On one occasion, they had attended a black church with my mother, and the pastor of that church gave recognition to my daddy, and he spoke words that will bring tears to my eyes to this day. The pastor said that Judge Hill had a white face, but he had a black heart. At that time, jurors were picked by a jury commission, all-white jury commission that picked mostly white prospective jurors. There are a few blacks scattered among the group, but as I said, it was mainly black. I mean, excuse me, it was mainly white. It should have been mainly black, maybe. But there was an agreement between the all-white lawyers at that time that if there were any blacks that were chosen to serve on a jury, that the plaintiff would strike one, and the defendant would strike one until there were no blacks. So there was never a black serving on any jury in Lauderdale County, or Colbert, or Franklin. Now, the grand jury is different. It consists of 15 members, and they're chosen randomly by the judge. My daddy would take, and they usually consisted of about 125 prospective jurors. But at the beginning of the court session, 15 would be chosen randomly to make up the grand jury. And the grand jury would return indictments in criminal cases, would oversee the docket in civil cases, would inspect the jail in Lauderdale and the city of Florence, and would do other duties that the judge would assign to him. My daddy called the grand jury together, approximately 125 members. That was one member out of that 125 that was an African American. Daddy had his court reporter always to write the juror's name, 125 of them, on slips of paper. He would then put those slips of paper in his hat, and he would pull them out one at a time, and they would take their seat in the jury box. Daddy knew that that one African American had a very small chance of serving on that jury. That's a chance of 125 to 1. But Daddy had an idea. He took a paper clip and he put on that slip that had that African American's name on it. And he started calling the jurors, picking them out one at a time from his hat. Then when he got to about 10 or 11, he felt around and felt that paper clip. And he pulled that juror's name out, and he called him. And the African American stood up and was somewhat stunned. Dad told him to take his seat, and he sat with the other grand jurors. Dad was apprehensive about how that would work out. And the black juror was nervous, to say the least. He pulled out a cigarette and put it to his lips and was trying to light it, but his hand was shaking. And Daddy said, one of the white jurors leaned over with the cigarette lighter and lit the black man's cigarette. And Daddy knew it was going to be okay.
What year was that?
That was, oh gosh, that was in the late 40s. Yeah. It had to be. It was before I graduated from high school in 1950. So it was in the late 40s.
Let me ask you a question. If you can, where did your dad get that desire to see the jury integrated? Where did his racial views come from?
Where did his
racial views come from?
I didn't really from his heart. He grew up that way. And
from his parents?
Well, from his parents, from his community. You know, he was the first one to go to college, and then went on to the University of Alabama School of Law.
It's just so rare for the late 40s to have a judge in Alabama consciously integrate a jury. Your dad seems unique, and I'm wondering where that came from.
And that's especially true in the 1940s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as I say, it just came from his heart.
From a religious view or a political view, a view of the law, do you know?
All of it. All of it.
Yeah.
Do you think the experience of working in the military government after the war might have had some?
I think that had, he was with the Allied military government, and that was, he went in as captain in the military government when the Nazis, the fascists, were defeated. Then military governors, including my daddy, would take over the government of the city. And Daddy served as military governor of Isle of Capri.
Really?
Which was a wonderful service.
Yeah.
But he issued a search warrant for the Contessa's villa, who was alleged to have had officers that were supplying her with American cigarettes and stockings and other goods. So he issued a search warrant for villa. Daddy was then transferred from the Isle of Capri to the town of Pozzuoli, Italy. And later he served as military governor of Naples.
So he had seen a lot of the world.
Yes.
Well,
And
thank you for telling that story about your father, because you told me that story years ago and I've always loved it.
Let me tell you a little bit about mine now. I hope that I can say that I followed in the footsteps of my father. I certainly had a wonderful friend and mentor in my father.
Did he talk to you about race and about what he had done on the jury?
Oh yeah.
What
Yeah.
did he tell you?
He told me the story about the paperclip. My mother told me the story about the black pastor saying that he had a white face but a black heart.
What did your dad tell you about those black churches when you were growing up? Things were segregated.
Oh, absolutely.
But you had a knowledge
Yes.
of black life because of your mom and dad.
Yes.
What sorts of things did they tell you?
Oh, we discussed it numerous times. And we talked about the injustice and how we hope things would change for the blacks. And of course, at that time we had separate but equal, which was an ill-conceived opinion of the Supreme Court of the United States. Not only was it ill-conceived, they didn't even have separate but equal. They had far less equal rights than white citizens. But I was elected to the Alabama House of Representatives, and 1966, took office November of 1966. My daddy had approached me about running for the House of Representatives when I finished law school and then law clerk in the Supreme Court, as Tom had mentioned, and served in the Attorney General's office. And Dad asked if I would consider it, and I thought a little bit, and I said, yeah, I believe I will. So I ran for the House, and in running, I covered every country store and every business in Lauderdale County. Now, one side story, I was campaigning in North Alabama, in the Waterloo area, on Pea Ridge Road. And I was going to country stores and handing out my card and asking for the votes. I came to a country store where a number of white men sit around, I think, playing checkers. I introduced myself and handed each one a card and said I'd appreciate the support. One of the men got up and said, Mr. Hill, if we can't support you, if you're in Tennessee, I thought, but in my
Alabama does look a lot like
oh yeah, you can't tell there's no line down the road, so you can't tell where you are. My first term in the legislature was all white, not a single black, in the House or the Senate. My second term, there were two blacks, Tom Reed and Fred Gray, both from predominantly black Macon County. They both became friends of mine, especially Fred Gray. We became close personal friends. And I'm going to jump ahead 30 years. when I stood with Fred Gray when he was elected as the first African American president of the Alabama Bar Association. And I was so proud to be there with him. But when my first term, and I was wet behind the ears, you know, I was a freshman legislator. And after a few weeks, George Wallace presented a resolution, one of his segregation resolutions, condemning federal judges in general, and Judge Frank Johnson in particular, for their orders and decrees maintaining civil and voting rights for blacks. There, as I mentioned, 105 members of the House, and there's the wall on each side of the speaker's podium, a desk, where there are a name of all the members of the House of Representatives. And there's a light, two lights on each side of each name. One is a green light for yes, aye, and one is a red light for no or nay. When that resolution was presented, both sides lit up with green lights, except for 3 red lights. One was my friend Bob Eddington from Mobile County. The other was Ben Cherner, a Jewish friend from Birmingham. And the third one was Bob Hill from Florence. Now, the speaker usually, after the votes are tallied on the board, he usually tells the clerk to close the voting machine and record the votes. But the speaker hesitated, and he sent one of his lieutenants back to my seat on the back row of the House chamber. And he said, "Bob," he said, "the speaker's asked that you might want to reconsider your vote." He said, "You've got a promising political career, but you could destroy your career with that vote." And I trembled a little bit, but I looked him in the eye. I said, "No, I voted and I will not change it." So he went back up, the speaker closed the machine and recorded the votes. 102 votes aye, 3 votes nay. That was my first term.
Did you get a response? Did people write to you?
No.
There was no pushback after the vote?
No, I didn't. I didn't get a backlash. I really did. You know, and during those days, George Wallace ran the legislature. He decided who was going to be the speaker. We voted on it, but he told us who we were going to vote for. And most, well, they were usually unanimously elected because there was an open ballot, and the governor was watching to see who was voting for his candidate and who wasn't.
Did you ever have any confrontations with Governor Wallace?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about some?
And I'll tell you, George Wallace and my father were at a convention one time. And George Wallace, Daddy told me, paid me a compliment. He said, "You know, I don't agree with Bob Hill, your son Bob Hill, in his voting, but said I respect him." And that meant a lot coming from George Wallace. But I decided to run for Speaker of the House. And of course, George Wallace still was in control.
Was this 68?
This was my last term.
Last.
This was in 1974, my last term. I decided to run for speaker. I had the endorsement of the Times Daily, the Decatur Daily, the Mobile Press Register, the Birmingham Post-Herald, and several other newspapers. But that didn't do me much good running for speaker in the Alabama House of Representatives. And a friend of mine that was a Wallace supporter, and he said, Bob, you know, I've talked to George Wallace about you running for speaker, and said, the governor can't agree to that. But said, if you would run for speaker pro tem, the governor will stay out of it. So I ran for speaker pro tem. As I said, there are 105 members of the House of Representatives, and to win the race, you've got to get at least 53 votes. Well, for some reason, the Wallace forces decided that instead of having an open ballot, to have a closed ballot, thinking that they could get some people to switch over. Well, it backfired on him, because folks started coming to me and said, I'm back with you now. Now there's going to be a closed ballot. The total of the vote, I got 52 votes. 52 votes. The Wallace forces called a recess of about 45 minutes and started talking to the legislators real strong. And on the runoff, I lost overwhelmingly, but it was a great experience. But I served 14 years in the Alabama House of Representatives, and I loved every minute of it.
You saw a lot of changes. Those were years of great change in the state.
Absolutely. From a pure white legislature to 2 African Americans and a contingent of 14 members. And there was those 14. And I don't know if I told you about the 14th member of the Black Caucus. My friend John T. came up to me one time and said, Bob, you know, the Wallace folks are saying that you are one of the blacks. I said, well, is that so? So I always say that I was one of the 14 first blacks elected to the Alabama legislature.
You had a black heart like your daddy.
Yeah.
How did Alabamians from North Alabama respond to these changes? What did the people from your home districts, what sorts of conversations were you having about all this change?
Lauderdale County was more for civil rights for blacks than the majority of counties. We had the first black to attend the University of North Alabama. Oh gosh.
Wendell Wilkie Gunn.
Wendell Wilkie Gunn. And at that time, George Wallace was standing in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama. When Wendell applied for admission to the University of North Alabama, then Florence State Teachers College, Dr. Norton, who was president, said, Mr. Wilkie, said, under the circumstances, I can't admit you, but let me suggest that you go to see a federal judge and get you an order, and I'll admit you. So he did, got that order, and he became the first African American at the University of North Alabama.
And of course, President Norton couldn't admit him because the law was segregation in the state.
Yes. Well, and of course it wasn't the law. It was just George Wallace's hold on the law. That, you know, people felt compelled not to push George Wallace too far. It's much easier to have the federal judges help than to try to strike out on your own. But the end result was the same.
That's something that we've noticed in these conversations about the 60s in the Schultz, is that this area is so different than central Alabama, Birmingham, and South Alabama. And part of that is demographics, I think. But part of it might be just what you're describing, a dependence linked more to the federal government than on the state government, a willingness because of TVA and because of other factors to seek help from the federal government.
Yes.
Did you see that at all in your time in politics?
Oh, yes. Consistently. Oh, gosh, there were so many federal orders issued. And Judge Johnson, Judge Frank Johnson, federal judge in Montgomery, received death threats.
Oh, yeah.
Received threats on his family. And, you know, George Wallace moderated his segregation stand in his late 70s and apologized to the black community. And he went to Frank Johnson, he had suffered and his family had suffered so much. And he asked Frank Johnson forgiveness. And Frank Johnson said, George, you're going to have to ask God for forgiveness.
It's reported that Wallace had a religious conversion of sorts.
Oh, yeah.
That led him
At that time.
that way, yeah.
Yes, he did.
I have a personal question. Did you ever know a man who became Attorney General of the United States when Carter was elected? Griffin Bell, Judge Bell.
Yeah, I know him. I don't know him personally, but of course I knew his reputation and his background.
There's something, it seems to me, about judges, like your dad, like Griffin Bell, and lawyers. There's a guy in Georgia named Warren Fortson who took a similar stand that you did and suffered somewhat for it, both in his career and also personally. But there's something about people who have a respect for the law when they say, I'm going to fulfill the law, I'm going to look at the law, like you were talking about your dad, listening and judging impartially and thinking reasonably, that led to different conclusions than politicians like George Wallace. Do you think that that's true?
Oh, yes. Yes. I think Dad always talked about the spirit of the law, and not the letter of the law sometimes. And he would bend the law within the framework of the law to create a more just system.
In an era where so many segregationists took the letter of the law and tweaked it to create injustice.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of it. That seems like something from the Apostle Paul, something from the book of Romans about the spirit of the law and the letter of the law.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate you asking me to be a part of this series you're doing on the civil rights. And it's been a pleasure to know you and be your friend for the past 35 years.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your coming and sharing these stories with us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're most surely welcome.
I feel like we'll probably call you again.
Oh,
We'll
I'm
have more
not.
questions.
You call them.
Hopefully not because of legal woes.
Oh, no. Now, as I told you, I'm basically retired. I do some work with Tammy Irons for the University of North Alabama, and take a few cases now and then, most of them pro bono.
Absolutely.
That was the fault I had in practicing law. I couldn't say no. I can't tell you how many clients I'd have. And I'd say, gosh, I've got so many cases, I'd like to help you. And they'd say, oh, we've been to every lawyer in Lauderdale County, and you're the only one that they said will help me.
Oh,
And of course, I kept taking them until I just really got overwhelmed. At one time, I literally got overwhelmed, and I had to take really a leave of absence from practice and go down and visit my daughter for about 3 or 4 weeks, and just got it all out of my mind. Came home with a fresh mind and went back to practice.
Everybody needs Sabbath.
That's
Even
right.
overworked lawyers.
Exactly. We're all overworked, Tom.
Thank you.
And gosh, what you've done.